Dust swirled across the landing pad as the transport ship settled onto the cracked concrete. Sarah watched through the small window as the ramp began to lower, her golden eyes taking in the brown landscape of Dust Haven. Everything here looked dead or dying. The buildings were low and functional, built to withstand the harsh desert winds that scoured this frontier world. She touched the small bag at her feet, containing everything she owned after her family lost their ancestral home. The matchmaker, a nervous human woman named Mrs. Dale, fussed with her tablet. "Remember, Mr. Hutchins is a very important man on this colony. Very wealthy. The mine he owns provides half the employment here. Just smile and be pleasant," Sarah nodded but said, "Nothing pleasant," as if 247 years of warrior training and noble lineage could be reduced to pleasant smiles for a stranger who had purchased her presence like goods from a catalog. But her family needed the money this arrangement would bring. Her younger siblings needed food. Her mother needed medicine. Sarah had volunteered for this because she was the oldest, the most expendable. The ramp touched ground and hot air rushed into the ship. Sarah picked up her bag and walked down, her boots clicking against metal then concrete. She kept her face calm, her posture straight. A Draknir warrior did not show fear or shame, even when both threatened to choke her. A crowd had gathered near the landing pad, humans mostly, with a few other species mixed in. Sarah spotted her intended match immediately. Gerald Hutchins stood at the front, wearing expensive clothes that looked wrong on this dusty world. His face was soft, his belly round with good living. He held a drink in one hand and looked bored. Mrs. Dale hurried forward. "Mr. Hutchins, may I present Sarah of House Nightscale, your intended bride from the Draknir homeworld." Sarah stopped 3 paces away and inclined her head with proper respect. Her scales caught the sunlight, the translucent outer layer of her humanoid skin showing the copper-colored armor beneath. Her horns, elegantly curved back from her temples, had been polished for this meeting. She wore simple traveling clothes, but they were clean and well-maintained. Gerald looked her up and down. His lip curled. "How old is she?" Mrs. Dale blinked. "Her file stated 247 years, sir. Prime age for Draknir females, as they live 800 years on average. 247? Gerald's voice rose loud enough for the crowd to hear. "I ordered a young bride, not some ancient fossil. Look at her. She's older than my grandmother would have been." Heat crept up Sarah's neck, but she remained motionless. Mrs. Dale stammered, "Sir?" The age conversion was clearly explained in the documentation. For her species, she's quite youthful. In human equivalent years, she would be considered. I don't care about conversions. Gerald stepped closer, his face twisted with disgust. I paid good money for this service. I expected youth and beauty, not some worn-out relic pretending to be civilized. He waved his hand dismissively. The deal is off. Take her back or leave her here, I don't care which. I'm not accepting damaged goods, the crowd murmured. Sarah felt every eye on her. Damaged goods. The words hit harder than any weapon she had faced in combat. Her fingers trembled slightly at her sides, but she locked them still through sheer will. A Draknir warrior could endure torture without breaking. She would not break now. Mrs. Dale looked panicked. Mr. Hutchins, please, there's been a misunderstanding. The contract clearly states, and I don't care about contracts with liars. Gerald turned his back on them both and walked away, his expensive boots leaving prints in the dust. His friends followed, some laughing. Sarah stood alone on the landing pad. The matchmaker was crying now, apologizing in a shaking voice, but Sarah barely heard her. The next transport back to civilized space would not arrive for 6 months. She had 100 credits to her name. Her family was counting on the marriage payment that would never come now. She had nothing. She was nothing. The crowd began to disperse, some people looking at her with pity, others with curiosity. Sarah wanted to transform, to spread her wings and fly away from this humiliation. But colony law prohibited unexpected shifts in public spaces. She was trapped in this small humanoid form, trapped on this world, trapped by her own desperate attempt to save her family. A shadow fell across her. Sarah looked up to find a human man standing nearby. He was older, maybe 50 or 60 in human years, with weathered brown skin and gray threading through his dark hair. He wore work clothes, dusty and practical, and a wide-brimmed hat shaded his eyes. A piece of dried grass hung from the corner of his mouth. He studied her for a moment, then removed his hat. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "name's Roy Patterson. I run a cattle ranch about 10 miles out from town." He gestured vaguely toward the horizon. I heard what happened just now. That was wrong, and I'm sorry you had to endure it. Sarah said nothing. What could she say? Roy continued, his voice steady and calm. I'm guessing you don't have anywhere to go right now, and the next transport won't be here for a while. My ranch could use another hand. Work's hard, hours are long, and the pay is honest but not fancy. I've got a spare cabin that's clean and private. You'd be treated fair and respectful, same as any other worker. Sarah found her voice. You want to hire me? After what you just witnessed? I witnessed a fool not knowing quality when he saw it. Roy put his hat back on. I also witnessed a woman standing with dignity when most people would have crumbled. That tells me you're strong, and strength is useful on a ranch. Question is whether you're interested. Pride warred with desperation inside Sarah. She had been a warrior once before her family fell. She had led troops in battle, had earned medals for valor. Now she was reduced to accepting manual labor from a stranger out of sheer necessity. But necessity was a harsh teacher, and Sarah had learned many harsh lessons in recent years. What kind of work? She asked. Mending fences, herding cattle, repairing equipment when it breaks, feeding animals, keeping watch for predators and thieves, whatever needs doing on any given day. Roy's expression remained neutral, neither pitying nor judging. I'll warn you straight that it's not glamorous. You'll end most days tired and dirty, but you'll also end them having earned your keep fairly. Sarah looked at the empty landing pad, at the departing crowd, at the brown desert stretching in all directions. She thought of her family waiting for news that would never come, of 6 months trapped here with nothing to do and no purpose to serve. I accept, she said. Roy nodded once. My truck's over there. Let's get you settled before the afternoon heat gets worse. Sarah picked up her bag and followed him across the dusty ground, leaving the landing pad and Gerald Hutchins' rejection behind. She did not know this human man or his intentions, but he had offered her something Gerald never had. He had offered her respect and honest work. For now, that was enough. Sarah woke before dawn to the sound of something howling in the distance. She lay still in the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling of the small cabin Roy had given her. 3 days had passed since he brought her to the ranch. 3 days of work that left her muscles aching in ways they had not ached in decades. She rose and dressed in the work clothes Roy had provided, sturdy pants and a shirt that could withstand the rough labor. Outside, the sky was beginning to lighten, turning from black to deep purple. Sarah walked across the dusty yard toward the main house where Roy was already moving around in the kitchen, visible through the window. He looked up when she entered and nodded toward the counter. Coffee's ready. Breakfast in 5 minutes. They ate in comfortable silence. Roy did not ask questions about her past or make awkward conversation. He simply ate his food, drank his coffee, and reviewed the day's tasks on a battered tablet. Sarah appreciated this. Words were often wasted between strangers. North fence needs checking, Roy said finally. Pete reported seeing some damage yesterday. Might be animals, might be something else. I'll show you how to make repairs. Pete was the only other person who lived on the ranch full-time, a young human with friendly manners and quick hands. He was already out with the cattle when Sarah and Roy reached the fence line. The damage was significant. Several posts had been knocked over and wire had been cut cleanly through. Not animals, Roy said quietly. He knelt to examine the wire. Someone did this deliberately. Who would damage your fence? Sarah asked. Roy stood and brushed dust from his pants. Gerald Hutchins owns the land on the other side of this fence. He's been trying to buy my water rights for years. I keep saying no, which makes him angry. He looked at Sarah. I won't lie to you. Taking you on might have made him angrier. If you want to leave because of that, I'll understand. Sarah looked at the cut fence, then at Roy's weathered face. Show me how to repair it. They worked through the morning, digging new post holes and stretching wire. The work was simple but required strength and patience. Sarah's hands blistered despite her tough skin, but she did not complain. Roy worked beside her, showing her the proper techniques, correcting her mistakes without making her feel foolish. By midday, the heat was brutal. They stopped to drink water in the shade of Roy's truck. Sarah removed her hat and felt the breeze cool her sweating face. Her scales itched under her skin, wanting to emerge fully, but she kept them controlled. You're stronger than most humans, Roy observed. That post you said earlier, Pete and I usually need 2 people for that. My species is naturally stronger, Sarah said simply. I am trying not to show off. Roy smiled slightly. Don't hold back on my account. Strength is useful, and honest work is honest work, no matter how easy or hard it comes to someone. They finished the fence by late afternoon and returned to the ranch house. Pete had dinner cooking, a simple stew with vegetables and meat. They ate together at the large wooden table, and Pete told stories about the more troublesome cattle until even Sarah found herself smiling. That night she lay in her cabin thinking about Roy's words. Do not hold back. All her life since her family's fall, she had been holding back. Hiding her warrior nature, suppressing her strength, making herself smaller and quieter to avoid drawing attention. The bride program had been more of the same, trying to be pleasant and acceptable for a man who would never see her as anything but a commodity. But Roy asked for honest work. Perhaps that meant honest strength too. The next week passed in a blur of tasks. Sarah learned to operate the hoverbike used for checking on distant pastures. She learned which cattle were troublemakers and which were docile. She learned how to read the sky for coming dust storms and how to secure equipment before the winds hit. She also learned about Roy through observation. He treated the cattle gently even when they were difficult. He paid Pete fairly and listened when the young man had suggestions. He kept his word about everything, from meal times to work schedules. He was, Sarah realized, a man of deep honor, even if he would never call it that. 2 weeks after her arrival, trouble came. Sarah was checking the southern pasture alone when she heard the cattle bellowing in panic. She urged the hoverbike faster and crested a ridge to see 4 men on bikes harassing the herd. They were using electric prods to scatter the animals, laughing as the terrified cattle ran in all directions. Rage flooded through Sarah. She had spent days learning these animals' temperaments, earning their trust. These men were undoing that work and causing pain for their own amusement. She drove straight toward them, positioning her bike between the men and the cattle. "Stop," she commanded. One of the men laughed. "Look, boys, it's Hutchins' reject." "What are you going to do, ancient lady? File a complaint?" Sarah dismounted. "Leave this land. These animals are under my protection." "Your protection?" The man revved his bike. "You're just hired help. Get lost before you get hurt." He drove at her, clearly intending to run her down or force her to jump aside. Sarah stood her ground. At the last second, she reached out and grabbed the front of his bike with both hands. Her Draknir strength surged through her arms as she lifted the entire bike and rider into the air and threw them sideways into the dirt. The other 3 men stared in shock. Sarah felt her scales beginning to surface, her body responding to the threat. She fought to maintain control of her transformation, but her eyes were blazing gold now, her horns more prominent. "Leave," she repeated, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones of her true form. "Now." They left, the thrown man scrambling back onto his damaged bike and fleeing with his companions. Sarah stood breathing hard, forcing her body back under control. The cattle had calmed and were clustering together nervously. She spent the next hour settling them, speaking softly, checking for injuries. When she returned to the ranch house at dusk, Roy was waiting on the porch. Pete must have told him what happened. Sarah prepared herself for questions or accusations. Instead, Roy just looked at her for a long moment. "Pete said you threw a man and his bike about 15 feet. 12 feet, Sarah corrected, and I was careful not to injure him seriously." Roy nodded slowly. "Those were Hutchins' men. They'll report back to him that you're not what you appear to be. I apologize. I should have controlled myself better. I understand if you want me to leave." "Leave?" Roy looked genuinely surprised. "Why would I want that? You protected my cattle and my property. That's exactly what I hired you for." He stood and walked down the porch steps until he was level with her. "Sarah, I knew from the start that you were holding back. I've been around enough non-humans to recognize when someone's not showing their full nature. Whatever you are beyond this form, it's part of you. I'm not asking you to hide it." Sarah felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. "My people are warriors. We are dragons. What you saw today was barely a fraction of what I could do." "Then I'm lucky to have you here," Roy said simply. "Come on, dinner's ready. You must be hungry after your day." They walked inside together, and for the first time since arriving on Dusthaven, Sarah felt like she might be building something real. Not the false life Gerald Hutchins would have demanded, but something honest, something worth protecting. Rain came to Dusthaven 3 months after Sarah's arrival, a rare event that turned the brown landscape briefly green. Sarah stood on the porch of her cabin watching water pour from the sky, something she had not seen since leaving her home world. The sound of it hitting the roof was soothing, almost musical. Roy appeared beside her, 2 mugs of hot tea in his hands. He offered her one without speaking, and they stood together watching the storm. This had become their habit in recent weeks. Quiet moments shared without the need for constant conversation. Sarah had learned that Roy was comfortable with silence, that he did not fill empty air with meaningless words. "My wife loved the rain," Roy said eventually. "She was from a water world originally. Came here as part of a settlement program 20 years back. We met at a supply depot and she started helping me with the ranch." He sipped his tea. "She died 15 years ago. Plague swept through the colony. Medicine came too late for a lot of folks." Sarah glanced at him. He rarely spoke of personal matters. "I am sorry for your loss." "Me too." Roy's expression was distant. "Point is, I know something about being with someone different from yourself. Different species, different needs, different ways of seeing the world. It's not always easy, but it's usually worth it." Before Sarah could respond, Pete came running through the rain. "Boss, the western pasture fence is down. Cattle are scattering." They spent the next 2 days in the rain, rounding up cattle and repairing fences. The work was miserable. Mud sucked at their boots and the wet cold seeped into their bones. But Roy worked alongside them, never asking them to do anything he would not do himself. Sarah found herself admiring this quality in him. Leadership through example rather than command. On the second night, exhausted and soaked, they took shelter in an old barn on the far edge of the property. The roof leaked in places, but it was better than being outside. Pete fell asleep immediately, curled up in dry hay. Roy started a small fire in an old barrel, more for morale than warmth. Sarah sat near the fire trying to dry her clothes. Her scales were showing more than usual, her body responding to the damp cold by adding extra protection. She noticed Roy looking at them. "They are not beautiful like some species," she said. "Draknir are built for war, not aesthetics." "I think they're striking," Roy said. "Like polished metal. Must be hard to maintain that humanoid form all the time, though." "It takes concentration, yes, but it is necessary for living among other species. Few people are comfortable around a full dragon." Roy added another piece of wood to the fire. "Can I ask you something?" "You don't have to answer if it's too personal." Sarah nodded. "Why did you really volunteer for that bride program? A warrior like you, someone with your strength and intelligence, you had other options." Sarah was quiet for a long time. Outside, the rain continued its steady drum against the roof. Finally, she spoke. "My family backed the wrong side in a civil war on my homeworld. We lost everything. Our lands, our titles, our ancestral horde. In Draknir culture, losing your horde is the deepest shame. It means you failed to protect what was entrusted to you. That wasn't your fault, though. Fault does not matter. Responsibility does. I am the oldest child. My siblings are young, still learning. My mother is sick and needs expensive medicine. My father died in the war." She stared into the flames. "The bride program offered a large payment for successful matches. I thought I could restore some of our honor, earn enough to support my family. Instead, I have brought them nothing." Roy was quiet for a moment. "You're supporting them with your wages here. Not as much as the bride payment would have been, but it's honest money. It is not enough. Maybe enough is different than you think." Roy shifted to look at her directly. "Seems to me your family already has something valuable. They have you, alive and working hard to help them. That's worth more than any hoard." Sarah felt unexpected emotion rise in her throat. She swallowed it down. "You are kind to say so. I'm not being kind. I'm being practical. Money and status come and go, but people who care about you, who work for you, who refuse to give up, those are rare." He smiled slightly. "I'm proof of that. This ranch has been failing slowly for years. I could have sold to Hutchins, taken the money, retired somewhere comfortable. But this land was what my wife and I built together. Giving it up would feel like giving up on her memory. So you work yourself to exhaustion instead. So I work hard for something that matters." Roy met her eyes. "Same as you're doing. Maybe we're both stubborn fools, but at least we're honest about it." Sarah found herself smiling. "Honest, stubborn fools. That would make a poor family motto. I don't know. Has a certain ring to it." They talked through the night, taking turns keeping the fire going while Pete slept. Roy told her about growing up on Earth before the colony ships, about the strange adjustment to artificial seasons and recycled air. Sarah told him about flying as a child, about the first time she breathed fire, about the ancient caves where dragons kept their hoards. When dawn came and the rain finally stopped, Sarah realized she had shared more with Roy in one night than she had shared with anyone in years. There was something about his calm acceptance that made honesty easy. He did not judge or try to fix things. He simply listened and understood. They finished rounding up the cattle and returned to the main ranch. Sarah went to her cabin to clean up and found herself pausing at the mirror. Her reflection showed scales glinting at her temples, her horns more prominent than usual. She had been letting her true form show more around Roy, and he had never once flinched or seemed uncomfortable. That evening, there was a gathering in town. Pete convinced them both to come along, saying they deserved a break after the rough week. Sarah reluctantly agreed. She wore her cleanest clothes and tried to make herself presentable. The gathering was at the town's only social hall, a simple building with music playing and people dancing. Sarah stood near the wall watching. She had never learned human dances and felt awkward trying. A drunk man stumbled over to her. She recognized him from the landing pad the day Gerald had rejected her. "You're that dragon lady, right? The one nobody wanted?" Pete stepped forward, but Sarah raised a hand. She looked at the drunk man with calm eyes. "I am Sarah of House Nightscale. I was indeed rejected by Gerald Hutchins, for which I thank him daily. He did me the favor of showing his true character before I was bound to him. But he called you old and ugly. He called me what his limited understanding could perceive. A man who measures worth in youth and surface beauty will always be poor no matter how much money he has." She smiled slightly, showing her sharp teeth. "I, on the other hand, have found honest work with honest people. I would say I am far richer than Mr. Hutchins, despite his mine and his money." The drunk man blinked, confused. Someone in the crowd laughed. The drunk wandered away, muttering. Sarah turned to find Roy watching her from across the room. He raised his drink slightly in a salute, his eyes warm with something that might have been pride. Sarah felt her heart do something unexpected. It skipped, then raced, then settled into a rhythm that felt both frightening and wonderful. She had been attracted to people before in her long life, but this felt different, deeper, more real. She made her way through the crowd to Roy's side. "I am not good at human dancing." "Neither am I," Roy admitted. "Want to stand here looking awkward together?" "That sounds perfect." They stood together while the party continued around them, and Sarah realized with startling clarity that she was happy. Truly happy, for the first time in longer than she could remember, and that happiness was dangerous, because it meant she had something to lose. Sarah spent 3 days in the colony's legal archives, searching through centuries of property law. Her eyes burned from reading screens in the dim light, but she refused to stop. Roy was going to lose his ranch, and she could not let that happen. Gerald Hutchins had filed a claim using an obscure colonial law from the early settlement days. If successful, he would gain access to all water rights on Roy's property, which would make the ranch worthless. The hearing was in 2 days. Roy had hired a lawyer, but the man seemed pessimistic about their chances. Sarah read through another document, then another. Her warrior training had included strategy and logistics, understanding complex systems and finding weaknesses in seemingly solid positions. She applied that training now, looking for the gap in Hutchins's legal attack. She found it near midnight on the 3rd day. Early colonial law included provisions for family homesteads. If a property owner entered a registered domestic partnership and declared the land a family holding, different protections applied. The law was old and rarely used, but it was still valid. Sarah checked 3 times to make sure she understood correctly, then printed the relevant documents. She walked back to the ranch under the stars, her mind racing. This solution would work legally, but it required Roy to enter a partnership. That was a significant commitment, not something to be suggested lightly. And if he agreed, it should be with someone he chose, not out of legal necessity. But perhaps a small voice in her mind whispered, perhaps he might choose her. She immediately dismissed the thought. Roy was kind to her, respectful, even friendly. But he was human and she was Draknir. Their lifespans were vastly different. She would watch him age and die while she still had centuries ahead. What kind of cruelty would it be to bind him to someone who would outlive him by so long? Sarah reached the ranch house to find Roy still awake, sitting on the porch with a glass of whiskey. He looked tired, older than his years. The stress of the impending legal battle was wearing on him. "You're up late," he said. "I found something." Sarah sat beside him and spread out the documents. There is a law very old that protects family homesteads from certain types of claims. If you enter a registered domestic partnership and file the proper paperwork, Hutchins' claim becomes invalid. Roy read through the documents carefully. This could work. It would work. The law is clear. So I need to find someone willing to partner with me for legal purposes. Roy set the papers down. That's asking a lot of someone. Sarah's heart was beating too fast. She kept her voice steady. It does not have to be a false arrangement. The law does not require that. It could be a genuine partnership. Roy looked at her, really looked at her, his eyes searching her face. Sarah, are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? I am saying that if you needed someone, and if that someone were willing, the partnership could be real. Her carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. If that person were acceptable to you. Acceptable? Roy laughed, but it was not unkind. Sarah, you're the most remarkable person I've met in decades. You're strong and smart, and you work harder than anyone I know. You make me laugh, and you understand silence, and you care about things that matter. He paused. But I'm 52 years old. You're going to live 800 years. I'd be asking you to watch me grow old and die while you're still in your prime. That's not fair to you. Should I not decide what is fair to me? Sarah felt heat rising in her face, her emotions making her scales shimmer. You think I have not considered this? You think I do not know the pain that would come? She stood and paced across the porch. I have lived 247 years, Roy. I have been in battles. I have lost family and friends. I have survived a war that destroyed my house's honor. I know about pain and loss. Then why would you choose more of it? Sarah turned to face him. Because 30 years of real happiness is worth 300 years of emptiness. Because I would rather have a short time with someone who sees me truly than an eternity with people who never look past my scales. Her voice dropped. Because when I think about leaving here, leaving you, it hurts worse than any wound I have received in combat. Roy stood slowly. When did this happen? When did we stop being employer and employee? I do not know. Somewhere between fixing fences and sitting in the rain. Somewhere between your quiet kindness and your terrible jokes. It just happened. Sarah felt vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with physical danger. But I will not ask you to make this choice out of legal necessity. If you want to find someone else for the partnership, I will understand. If you want me to leave after the hearing, I will leave. But I needed you to know the truth. Roy crossed the porch until he stood directly in front of her. He reached up and gently touched her face, his calloused hand warm against her cheek. I started falling for you the day you stood on that landing pad and refused to break. You were facing public humiliation and you didn't let it diminish you one bit. I thought there's someone with real strength. Roy, let me finish. His thumb traced the line of scales near her temple. I've been trying not to feel this because it seemed impossible. You're going to outlive me by centuries, and that seemed like a terrible thing to ask you to accept. But maybe you're right. Maybe it's worth it anyway. You are certain? Sarah asked. This is not just to save the ranch? The ranch matters, but you matter more. Roy smiled. I'd rather have 30 good years with you than 100 years without you. Let's be honest, stubborn fools together. Sarah laughed and cried at the same time, emotion she had held back for months finally breaking free. Roy pulled her close and she let herself relax against him, this human man who had somehow become her entire world. They registered their partnership the next morning at the colony administration office. The clerk who processed their paperwork had been at the landing pad the day Gerald rejected Sarah. She smiled genuinely as she stamped their documents. About time, Roy. You two have been obvious for weeks. We have? Roy asked. To everyone but yourselves, apparently. The clerk handed them their certificates. Congratulations. You're officially partners in the eyes of the colony. Sarah felt Roy take her hand as they left the office. Such a simple gesture, but it meant everything. In Draknir tradition, partnership bonds were sacred. Once formed, they lasted beyond death. She had chosen Roy knowing she would grieve him for centuries after he was gone. But she had also chosen him knowing that those centuries of grief would be worth the years of joy. That evening, Sarah went to her cabin and removed a small case she had kept hidden. Inside was her mother's last message to her, recorded before Sarah left for the bride program. She played it now, her mother's face appearing in hologram above the player. My daughter, you carry our family's hope with you, but remember that hope comes in many forms. Sometimes we find what we need in unexpected places. Trust your heart, not just your duty. Sarah had thought her mother meant the bride arrangement. Now she understood differently. She pulled a scale from near her heart, the most painful and significant scale to remove. It would grow back eventually, but the act of giving it was profound in Draknir culture. She spent an hour carving it into a pendant, smoothing the edges, polishing it until it gleamed like a copper gem. She found Roy on the porch of the main house. "I have something for you." She placed the pendant in his hand. "In my culture, we give a heart scale to our chosen partner. It represents trust and devotion. The scale comes from nearest my heart, and giving it means I trust you with everything I am." Roy examined the pendant carefully, understanding the significance. "I don't have anything comparable to give you. You have already given me what I needed most. You gave me respect when I had been rejected. You gave me honest work when I was desperate. You gave me a home when I had nowhere to go." Sarah touched his chest. "You gave me your heart whether you meant to or not. That is enough." Roy put the pendant on a chain around his neck. "We're really doing this, Dragon Lady and Human Cowboy." "We really are." They sat together on the porch as the sun set. Officially partners now. Officially bound together in the eyes of the law and in the eyes of her culture. Tomorrow they would go to court and fight to keep the ranch. Tomorrow Gerald Hutchins would learn that his rejection had led to something far better than he could have imagined. But tonight, they simply sat together, hands clasped. Two people from different worlds who had found something rare and precious in each other. The arbitration chamber was packed with colonists who had come to watch the hearing. Gerald Hutchins sat at the front table with 3 expensive lawyers, all of them wearing suits that cost more than most people on Dusthaven made in a year. He looked confident, almost bored. Roy sat at the other table with his single lawyer, a tired-looking man named Frank who had been practicing colonial law for 30 years. Sarah sat beside Roy, wearing her cleanest clothes, her scales barely visible under careful control. Gerald noticed her and his lip curled in disgust. "I see you found someone desperate enough to take damaged goods." Roy's hand tightened on Sarah's, but she remained calm. "I found someone smart enough to recognize value you were too foolish to see." The arbitrator, a stern older woman named Judge Chen, called the hearing to order. "This is a property dispute regarding water rights on the Patterson Ranch. Mr. Hutchins has filed a claim using Settlement Era Statute 42. Mr. Patterson contests this claim. We will hear arguments from both sides." Gerald's lead lawyer stood and presented their case with smooth confidence. The old statute was clear, he argued. Water rights could be claimed by adjacent landowners if certain conditions were met. Those conditions had been satisfied. The law was the law, regardless of how inconvenient it might be for Mr. Patterson. When Frank stood to present their defense, he looked nervous. But his voice was steady as he introduced their counter-argument. "Your Honor, we submit that Settlement Era Statute 67 supersedes Statute 42 in this case. When a property is registered as a family homestead under a domestic partnership, different protections apply." He presented their partnership certificate and the homestead filing they had completed the day before. Gerald's lawyers exchanged glances. Their lead counsel stood again. "Your Honor, this appears to be a partnership of convenience, created specifically to circumvent the law. Do you have evidence that the partnership is false?" Judge Chen asked. "The timing is suspicious. They registered just days before this hearing." Roy stood without being asked. "Your Honor, if I may speak?" Judge Chen nodded. "Go ahead, Mr. Patterson. Sarah has been working on my ranch for 4 months. She's not just a partner on paper. She's my partner in every way that matters. The legal filing was recent, yes, but the relationship it represents has been growing since the day she arrived." Roy looked directly at Gerald. "And if we'd known about this legal protection sooner, we would have filed sooner. We're not exploiting the law. We're using it exactly as it was intended to protect families and their homes." Sarah felt warmth spread through her chest at Roy's words. He was defending not just the ranch, but their bond, their choice to be together. Judge Chen reviewed the documents carefully. "The partnership appears legitimate to me. The homestead filing is properly executed. I'm afraid your claim is invalid, Mr. Hutchins. The Patterson Ranch is protected under Statute 67. Gerald's face turned red. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly. "This is absurd. She's not even human. This partnership is a mockery. Mr. Hutchins, Judge Chen's voice was ice. The law makes no species requirements for domestic partnerships. Your objection is noted and overruled. This hearing is concluded. They left the chamber with Frank grinning and shaking Roy's hand. People congratulated them as they walked through the crowd. Sarah noticed Gerald watching them, his expression dark with rage. He is not going to accept this quietly, she murmured to Roy. I know, but we won today. That's what matters. They were wrong about Gerald accepting it quietly. That became clear 2 nights later. Sarah woke to the sound of engines, many engines approaching fast. She was out of her cabin in seconds, scanning the darkness. Lights appeared on the horizon, moving toward the ranch. At least a dozen vehicles, maybe more. She ran to the main house and pounded on the door. Roy appeared, already pulling on his boots. What is it? Company. Armed, I think. Pete emerged from his room looking scared. Is it Hutchins? Probably. Roy went to the gun cabinet and started handing out rifles. Call Colony Security. Tell them we have intruders. They are 15 minutes away at best, Sarah said. These vehicles will be here in 5. Roy looked at her. Can you hold them off for 15 minutes? I can hold them off much longer than that. But Roy, if I do this, everyone will see what I truly am. They will see the dragon. Then let them see. Roy touched the scale pendant hanging around his neck. You've been holding back since you got here. Don't hold back now. Protect our home. Our home. Those 2 words settled something inside Sarah. This was not just Roy's ranch anymore. This was their land, their life together. And she would defend it with everything she had. Stay in the house, she told them. No matter what you see or hear, stay inside until I tell you it is safe. She walked out into the yard as the vehicles roared closer. When they were 100 yards away, she let her transformation begin. It was glorious and terrible at once. Her body stretched and expanded, bones reshaping, scales emerging like armor across her entire form. Her wings unfurled, each one 40 feet from tip to base. Her neck elongated, her face pushing forward into a powerful snout filled with teeth. Her tail lashed behind her, capable of crushing stone. In 30 seconds, Sarah had gone from a humanoid woman to a full dragon, her true form revealed under the starlight. The vehicles stopped. Men poured out, at least 20 of them, all carrying weapons. She recognized some of them as Hutchins miners and security personnel. They stared up at her in shock. Leave, Sarah said, her voice carrying the deep resonance of her dragon form. Leave now and I will let you go unharmed. One of the men, braver or more foolish than the others, raised his plasma rifle. It's just one big lizard. We've got numbers. Then let me educate you about dragons. She moved faster than something her size should be able to move. Her tail swept 3 men off their feet. Her wing knocked over 2 vehicles. When someone fired at her, the plasma blast splashed harmlessly off her scales. She breathed fire, not at the men but over their heads, creating a wall of flame that forced them to scatter. She could have killed them all in seconds. Her warrior training gave her 100 ways to end this fight with lethal efficiency. But Roy had taught her something about restraint, about choosing strength that protected rather than destroyed. So she fought carefully. She pinned men to the ground with her claws but did not crush them. She used her fire to frighten and contain, not to burn. She roared with enough volume to shake the ground, making it clear that she was holding back out of mercy, not weakness. The fight, if it could be called that, lasted less than 10 minutes. By the end, the men were running, abandoning their vehicles, fleeing into the night on foot. Sarah let them go. She had made her point. Colony security arrived to find her standing guard over a dozen empty vehicles, her massive form impossible to miss. The security chief, a grizzled veteran named Sue, just sighed. Should have known Hutchins would try something stupid. You didn't kill anyone, did you? No. They will all have bruises and damaged pride, but nothing permanent. Good. Makes the paperwork easier. Sue looked up at Sarah's dragon form with professional assessment. You're registered with the colony, right? Species documentation current? Yes, I filed all required paperwork when I arrived. Then you were within your rights to defend your property. We'll round up Hutchins' men and have a long talk with Mr. Hutchins about sending armed mercenaries to harass law-abiding citizens. Roy emerged from the house, looking up at Sarah with something like awe. You're magnificent. Sarah felt embarrassed despite her victory. I am large and frightening. You're powerful and beautiful. There's a difference. Roy walked closer, unafraid, and placed his hand on her scaled foreleg. Thank you for protecting our home. Sarah carefully lowered her head until her enormous snout was level with Roy. Always. I will always protect what is ours. Pete and the security team watched as Roy embraced the sight of a dragon's head, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Sue shook her head with a smile. You two are going to be legendary around here. As the suns rose over the ranch, Sarah remained in her dragon form, too tired to shift back immediately. Roy brought her water and sat beside her, leaning against her scaled side. They watched the dawn together, dragon and human, partners who had just fought their first real battle. Gerald Hutchins was arrested that morning. The mercenaries all testified that he had hired them to scare off the new residents of the Patterson Ranch. Combined with his previous harassment, the charges were serious. He would spend years in colony detention and his mine would be sold to pay his fines. But Sarah barely thought about Gerald. He was just a bitter man who could not stand to see others happy. What mattered was the ranch still standing. The cattle safe and healthy, Roy sitting beside her, his hand resting on her scales. They had won. Together. 6 months later, Sarah stood at the same landing pad where Gerald Hutchins had rejected her. Everything looked the same, the cracked concrete, the dusty buildings, the brown horizon. But everything was different now. She was not standing alone. Roy stood beside her, his hand in hers. Pete waited nearby with the truck. They had come to meet an incoming transport, but not for the reason Sarah had originally arrived. Word of their story had spread across the Alliance worlds. The dragon warrior who was rejected and found true partnership with a human rancher. Some people thought it was romantic. Others found it curious. A few thought it was scandalous. Sarah did not care what people thought. She had learned that opinions from those who did not know her were worthless. What mattered was the message she had received 3 weeks ago. The Bride Exchange program had contacted her, asking if she would be willing to help counsel other participants who were struggling with difficult matches or adjusting to new worlds. Sarah had agreed immediately. The transport landed and the ramp lowered. A young woman emerged, her skin covered in soft purple fur, her ears tall and pointed. She looked terrified. Sarah recognized that expression. She had worn it herself not so long ago. Sarah walked forward and the woman's eyes went wide, seeing Sarah's scales and horns. Hello, my name is Sarah. I am here to help you get settled on Dust Haven. I am Lena, the woman said quietly. My match canceled 2 days ago. He said I was too primitive looking. The program coordinator said I could stay here temporarily while they arranged transport back to my homeworld. Transport takes time, Sarah said gently. While you wait, would you like honest work and a safe place to stay? I know a ranch that is always looking for good people. Lena's ears perked up slightly. You would do this for a stranger? Someone did it for me once. Come on, let me introduce you to my partner. Roy greeted Lena warmly and helped her into the truck. As they drove back to the ranch, Sarah told Lena her own story. How Gerald had rejected her, how Roy had offered her work and respect, how that had grown into something neither of them expected. So you stayed, Lena said. You did not go back to your homeworld. I found something better here, family, purpose, love. Sarah glanced at Roy, who smiled. But you might choose differently, and that is fine too. You have options. That is the important thing. They spent the next few weeks helping Lena adjust to ranch life. She was shy but hardworking, and she had an unexpected talent with the cattle. The animals trusted her immediately, following her gentle commands. Roy was impressed enough to offer her permanent employment if she wanted it. Lena was still deciding when her situation changed. A merchant from her homeworld arrived on Dust Haven for trade negotiations and happened to see her in town. He recognized her clan markings and struck up a conversation. By the end of the week, they were courting. By the end of the month, Lena had decided to stay on Dust Haven after all, but as the merchant's partner rather than a ranch hand. Thank you, she told Sarah at her going-away dinner. You showed me that rejection is not the end, that we can build new lives from failure. After Lena left, more messages came. Other participants in the bride program, other people in cross-species relationships, all asking for advice or help. Sarah and Roy found themselves becoming unexpected advocates for interspecies understanding. The colony government asked them to speak at a council meeting about their experience. Sarah was nervous about public speaking, but Roy encouraged her. Just tell the truth. That is all anyone can ask. She stood before the council and told her story simply. The rejection, the work, the growing partnership, the battle to keep their home, the choice to build a life together despite the challenges. "We are not perfect," she said. "Roy is human and I am Draknir. Our lifespans do not match. Our cultures are different. Our biology is different, but we have something more important than perfect compatibility. We have respect. We have honesty. We have commitment to building something together." She paused. If the Alliance truly wants unity between species, it must start with seeing each other as individuals, not stereotypes. It must start with giving dignity to everyone, regardless of how different they seem. The Council passed new regulations for the Bride program, including better screening of participants and stronger protections for those who were mistreated. It was a small change, but it mattered. News reached Sarah from her homeworld. Her family had heard about her partnership and the battle with Hutchins' mercenaries. In Draknir culture, defeating enemies and protecting territory was the highest form of honor. Her family's status had been partially restored based on her achievements. Her mother sent a message. "You have done well, my daughter. Better than we ever hoped. You have found honor not through wealth or title, but through genuine strength and loyalty. This is the old way, the true way. Your siblings look up to you now. Come visit when you can and bring your partner. We wish to meet the human who earned a dragon's heart." Sarah played the message for Roy. "My mother wants to meet you." "Is that good or terrifying?" Roy asked. "Probably both. Draknir families can be intense, but they will respect you because I respect you." Sarah leaned against him. "Besides, you faced down Gerald Hutchins and watched me fight as a dragon. My mother will seem easy after that." They planned a trip back to Sarah's homeworld for the next year, when the ranch could spare them both. Pete was more than capable of running things for a few weeks, and they had hired 2 more hands to help with the expanding operation. The ranch itself was thriving. With the threat from Hutchins eliminated, they had been able to make improvements. New fences, better equipment, and expansion of their herd. Roy had insisted that Sarah become a full legal partner in the business, not just his romantic partner. They made decisions together, split profits fairly, and built something stronger than either could have managed alone. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Roy asked a question he had been holding on to. "Do you have regrets? About staying here, about us?" Sarah considered the question seriously. She thought about her original plan, the bride payment that never came, the status she had hoped to gain. She thought about the life she might have had if Gerald had accepted her. A life of pretending to be something smaller than she was, just to make someone else comfortable. "No regrets," she said finally. "Gerald's rejection was the best thing that could have happened to me. It freed me to find what I actually needed rather than what I thought I should want." "What did you need?" "A partner who sees me. All of me, dragon and humanoid, warrior and worker, strong and vulnerable. Someone who does not ask me to be smaller or quieter or easier. Someone who says be yourself and means it." She squeezed his hand. "I needed you, though I did not know it when I arrived." Roy pulled out a small wrapped package from his pocket. "I have something for you. Anniversary present, sort of. 6 months since we made it official." Sarah unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a metal tag, the kind ranchers use to mark their property. But instead of a property marker, it said simply, "Home." "I know you gave me your heart scale," Roy explained. "I wanted to give you something that represented what you gave me. You made this ranch a home again. Before you arrived, it was just a place I worked. Now it is where I want to be because you are here." Sarah felt tears sting her eyes. "I will treasure this always." They sat together as the stars emerged, talking about their plans for the future. They would visit Sarah's family. They would continue helping others in the bride program. They would grow the ranch, maybe add some new ventures. They would have years together, precious and finite years, and they would make every single one count. Sarah knew the pain would come eventually. Roy would age and she would not. She would watch his hair go white, his movements slow, his body fail. She would stand at his grave someday and face centuries of life without him. That knowledge was always present, a shadow at the edge of her happiness. But right now he was here. His hand was warm in hers. His laugh was loud when she made a joke. His presence was solid and real and irreplaceable. Right now they were building something beautiful together, and when the time came for grief, she would carry it with pride. She would remember every moment, every conversation, every shared sunset. She would tell their story to anyone who would listen. This tale of a dragon lady who was rejected and a human cowboy who said, "Then be mine." It would not be a story about how love conquered all. It would be a story about how two people chose each other despite every obstacle and made something real from that choice. For now, that was enough. That was everything. Roy leaned over and kissed her temple, right where her scales met her skin.
"What are you thinking about?"
The future, us. How lucky I am. We are lucky, Roy corrected. Both of us. Sarah smiled and rested her head on his shoulder. In the distance, she could hear the cattle settling for the night. Pete was singing in the barn, his voice carrying on the evening breeze. The ranch was alive and thriving, full of sound and purpose. She had come to Dust Haven as a rejected bride with nothing to her name. She had been humiliated, dismissed, treated as worthless. Now she was a partner, a warrior, a bridge between worlds, and most importantly, someone who was loved exactly as she was. The Dragon Lady stood no longer silent. She had found her voice, her strength, and her home. And she had found it all because one human cowboy looked past what others saw as flaws and recognized her worth. That was the real magic. Not in her ability to breathe fire or transform into a dragon. The magic was in being seen truly and loved completely. That was the story worth telling.